a car accident on my way to work. After waking up from a coma for a few days, the doctor told me that brain injury may cause amnesia. The next day, I tried to joke and asked the woman sitting in front of the bed, "Who are you? What is our relationship?" She replied indifferently, "We are ordinary friends." At that moment, Monica said that our 7 year secret relationship was just ordinary friends. I felt like I was slapped in the face by reality. Her expression was as indifferent as if she was talking about the weather, and she was so distant that I felt unfamiliar with her. Did I fool you? I tried to cover up the disappointment in my heart with a relaxed tone, but the words were stuck in my throat and I couldn't utter them out. She lowered her head and scrolled through her phone, as if she hadn't heard anything at all. In the cold air, she finally looked up. "Since you're awake, I'll leave first. There are still important things to deal with in the company." Before I could respond, she stood up, her steps decisive, as if driven by some urgent matter. But suddenly, when she walked to the door, she seemed to be pulled by her remaining conscience, turned back and said perfunctorily, "Have a good rest." The moment the door closed, the smile on my face completely collapsed. In the empty ward, I was left with only a blank expression and deep self-mockery. 7 years of underground love turned out to be just a joke. In fact, no one around me knows about the relationship between Monica and I. We were college sweethearts from sophomore year to now. 7 years have passed from campus to workplace, and we are very familiar with each other. But her words, "ordinary friends," just now made everything seem ridiculous. After graduating from university, we both joined the top company in Shanghai as market planners. We were young and energetic at the time, and we were afraid of gossip about our office romance, so we tacitly chose to keep a low profile. As our positions were promoted, I was more eager to make our relationship public, but she was always vague about it. "Office romance is not good, so it's better not to publicize it." This was her excuse every time, and I naively believed it. Until today, I finally understood that she may not want to make it public because it means responsibility. She said we were ordinary friends probably because she was not afraid of me questioning her after I recover my memory. Anyway, love had already worn out. The appearance of a third party is inevitable. I was not completely unaware of her estrangement. When you love someone for a long time, even the slightest changes become as familiar as the lines on your palm. Monica's indifference was initially just that she came home late more often, and her greetings to me became more and more perfunctory. Later, she frequently mentioned the new intern in the company, Chris. Chris, a common name, but with a great background. She is the son of the company's boss, Naruto, a typical rich second generation, tall, rich, and handsome. The HR even gossiped to me secretly, saying that her purpose of joining the company was just to gain some work experience. At first, Monica pretended to be serious when she mentioned her. "It's always bad to offend her." Then she added lightly, "Girls and rich second generations like her are not my type at all." I believed her, but later, she didn't even bother to cover it up. Less than half a month after Chris joined, I found on Monica's music account that she and Chris followed each other. In the past 2 years, Monica has almost no time to listen to music. This is normal, as work is getting busier and busier, and life is so tiring. However, this account was used by us when we were in college. At that time, we listened to music together every day, and the total time reached an astonishing 8,000 hours. She even created a playlist named after me, which was filled with memories of our years together. There were little love songs that made me happy, songs by my favorite singers, melodies I had shared on WeChat moments, and songs she used to express her longing for me during the long-distance relationship during the summer and winter vacations. But now, the playlist is gone. She deleted it, and her recent listening history shows that it is all K-pop songs. Those songs are not her style at all, but they happen to be Chris's favorite. At first, I didn't want to believe this fact. After all, we have been in love for 7 years. I tried to defend her and treat her better as much as possible. We are market planners. Maybe she is trying to keep up with the trend of the young market. Thinking this way may comfort myself for a while. So I quietly logged out of her account without asking or questioning. I have always been a steady person. I never get angry without real evidence. After all, the people who can really hold on to the end at the poker table are always those with the calmest expressions and the fewest words. But gradually, I heard from my colleagues' gossip that Monica and Chris had a good rapport, and I was shocked. I found that Monica and Chris' rapport was not limited to listening to music. In early February, she took on a new project, and the client she was in charge of was a Frenchman who was very difficult to deal with. During that time, I was busy with another project in another city with my team, and I was so tired every day that I didn't even have time to eat. One day, I just finished work and called her to ask about the progress of her project. She didn't answer, probably because she was busy. I had no choice but to send her a WeChat message, but she didn't reply even after waiting for a long time. Later, I accidentally saw her circle of friends and saw that she had posted a group photo of the project team. Chris stood beside her, making a scissors hand gesture and smiling brightly. The copywriting was "Know yourself and know your enemy." What surprised me even more was that I soon discovered that Chris also posted a similar circle of friends, with the text "Invincible in 100 battles." The content of the two people echoed each other, as if there was some kind of tacit understanding that only they understood. That day I clicked on her WeChat signature. Her previous signature was related to me, and it was our exclusive code. But now, she has changed it, and I don't even know when she changed it. Maybe when she typed that sentence, I had gradually faded from her life. She didn't reply to my message, but left a comment under Chris's moments. "Eat quickly, or you'll get hungry." I looked at this sentence, touched my stomach, which was aching from hunger, and turned off my phone. 3 days later, she sent a bouquet of flowers. After 3 days in the hospital, the doctor said I could be discharged. During my stay in the hospital, I did not receive a greeting from Monica, not even a simple message. But on the day I was discharged, she sent a cake to me. Looking at the cake, I still didn't give up and decided to give her another chance. Sitting in the corridor of the hospital, I called her. It took a long time before the call was connected. On the morning of my discharge, I called Monica and said in a gentle voice, "I'm discharged today. Do you have time to pick me up?" There was silence on the other end of the line for a few seconds, and her answer was brief and cold. "I'm sorry, William. I'm busy and can't leave. I'll call a car for you." "What are you doing?" I tried to keep my tone calm. The other party was silent for a while, probably because she didn't expect me to be so direct. She was used to me not asking questions, but this time I didn't give her a chance to escape. I knew she was not busy because our project had just been completed and now was the least busy time at work. She didn't say anything in the end, and I sighed and hung up the phone. The sincerity I once had, now I feel nothing at all. A woman's love or hate is really hard to hide. I still remember the year I graduated. I suddenly had gastroenteritis in the middle of the night, and I called her before I passed out. When I woke up, she was sitting next to the bed, wearing slippers on one foot and sneakers on the other foot, and both shoes were on her left foot. At that time, she was red-eyed and scared. You don't know, when I opened the door and saw you lying on the ground, my heart almost stopped. In the future, call 120 in advance for such things. Otherwise, what if I don't answer the call? I smiled weakly, leaning on the hospital bed and looking at her. At that moment, dependence and trust filled my heart. But in my heart, you are the safest. Once upon a time, she cared about me so much, and I thought she would always be by my side. But as time passed, the memories became distant, and the sincerity at the beginning had been completely diluted in this relationship. I looked down at the cake on the table, finally shook my head, and threw it into the trash can next to me. "Don't you like this cake?" A strange man's voice suddenly sounded behind me. I turned around and saw a handsome man. He pointed at the cake in the trash can and said apologetically, "I'm sorry. My driver accidentally hit you yesterday and sent you to the hospital. I contacted your emergency contact, but I was busy and couldn't stay in the hospital. This is my gift for you when you leave the hospital. In addition, the hospital bill has been paid. If you need anything else, please let me know." I was stunned. It turned out that the cake was not sent by Monica at all, but was a token of apology from this passerby. I looked up and smiled politely and appropriately. "I'm sorry, I thought it was a gift from my ex-girlfriend. Thank you very much. Our relationship has finally come to an end." At this moment, I finally understood that the relationship between Monica and I had come to an end. Giving her another chance would only be deceiving myself. When I got home, I opened the door and saw Monica already sitting on the sofa. She turned on the TV, which was playing a variety show that she was not interested in at all, and she lowered her head to stare at her phone as if she was embarrassed to face me. But when I looked at her carefully again, she was looking down at her phone with a faint smile on her lips. She looked more relaxed than ever before and kept replying to the other party. Her face for a long time. This long-lost tenderness made my chest tighten. She was so engrossed in watching that she didn't even hear the door open. I called out softly, "Monica." She raised her head. Her smile instantly disappeared. Her eyes became indifferent, and she subconsciously locked the screen of the phone in her hand and put it upside down on the sofa. "You're discharged from the hospital?" she said, with a hint of surprise in her tone. I looked at her and finally laughed, laughing at her and at myself. At this moment, I knew very well that it was meaningless to continue like this. A quiet but emotionless breakup. "Let's talk." My voice was calm, but there was a hint of distance. Monica was slightly stunned, but didn't say anything, just nodded. Our breakup went surprisingly smoothly. Both of us were very calm, as if we had expected this day to come. In fact, there was nothing much to talk about. It was just a matter of making the tacit facts clear. When I said, "Let's break up," she didn't even ask why. After a moment of silence, she only said to me, "I'm sorry." I didn't accept her apology, but calmly arranged the post-breakup matters, when to move out, how to divide the things at home, all listed one by one in a rational tone. Monica seemed a little surprised. She frowned and stared at my face, as if looking for an answer. "William, you don't seem sad at all." "The sad time is long gone." I raised my eyes and looked at her, calmly without a trace of emotion. "I have been sad for a long time. When you deleted the playlist that belonged to me. When you listened to K-pop music that you had no interest in to please Chris. When you said to me, who was pretending to have lost my memory, 'We are just ordinary friends.' When you were busy playing push and pull with Chris and didn't even bother to reply to my WeChat messages. By then, I was already sad. I didn't tell her this. I just looked at her calmly. Monica's reaction made me feel ridiculous. Even though it was the result of her proposal to break up, and even the freedom she had always wanted, when she found out how calm I was, she still felt unwilling to accept it. Maybe, in her mind, I should cry and beg her to stay, or argue with her angrily. But I didn't, because I have already experienced these emotions. A relationship is like a tumor in the body. Monica is like a benign tumor in my body. It exists and makes you feel uncomfortable, but it is not immediately fatal. However, if you leave it alone, it will always worsen and eventually erode your health and vitality bit by bit. So I chose to remove it while it was still benign. The process might be painful, but the pain is only temporary. As long as it is removed, I will be healthy in the end. When Monica packed up and prepared to leave, I calmly asked her one last question. "Monica, have you ever regretted loving me?" "Monica," I asked calmly, "did you change your mind because Chris is Naruto's son, or simply because she is her?" Monica stood at the entrance and looked back. The light shone on her face, which was familiar yet strange. Her face was more mature and less immature than when she was in college. At that time, she stood on the playground, blushing and awkwardly confessing to me. But now, she has become a person who can navigate the deep sea of interests with ease. She paused for a few seconds and slowly said, "William, people always want to move higher." Her words made me laugh involuntarily, with a sense of mockery and relief. I looked at her and smiled sincerely. "Monica, I wish you great success and success." She looked at me, and there seemed to be a trace of regret in her eyes, but that regret seemed insignificant in front of her ambition. She finally sighed. "William, don't hate me." I didn't answer, and I didn't even bother to look at her. We can't forget each other. We can only continue to meet. The downside of an office romance is probably that after breaking up, you can't even forget each other in a decent way. The day after the breakup, I went to work as usual. When the taxi stopped downstairs of the company, I saw Monica and Chris standing together, surrounded by other members of their team. It was lunchtime, so they should be eating together. Chris is obviously a very cheerful rich man with a bright smile on his face. He often buys Monica all kinds of brand name bags and takes her to various high-end places, which are things I can't do. Chris stood in front of Monica, gesticulating and talking about something. Monica smiled and looked at her tenderly, occasionally holding her arm to help her avoid the crowd behind her, looking familiar and natural. As I watched their backs gradually go away, I came to my senses. The driver's voice sounded in front of me. "Young man, are you secretly in love with that beautiful girl?" I smiled and explained casually. "No, that's my ex-girlfriend." The driver's expression changed from gossiping to embarrassed, as if he wanted to comfort me, but didn't know how to start. I replied softly, "It's okay, it doesn't affect me." The busyness of work overshadows everything. After I entered the company, Xiao Zhang, the receptionist, saw me and came up to me in surprise. "Brother William, are you discharged from the hospital?" "Really? You didn't even let us go to see you." I smiled and said casually, "It's nothing serious." "I'm fine, right?" As I spoke, I asked casually, "How is the review of the Hong Kong case going?" She quickly took out a stack of printed materials and followed me into the office. After putting down the materials, she lowered her voice and came over, looking a little indignant. Brother William, don't look at the data yet. I have something to tell you. I put down what I was holding and looked at her. Her expression showed dissatisfaction and a little anger. Do you know? Albert will be in charge of the Nanjing branch next month. Office undercurrent. The turmoil after she left. Everyone says that after she leaves, the vacant director position will probably be between you and Monica. Xiao Zhang leaned against the door of the tea room with a somewhat mysterious expression. Over the years, Monica and I have been on par in terms of performance, and there are always people in the company comparing us. There is nothing wrong with competition. After all, this is the workplace, not kindergarten. You continue. I flipped through the documents in my hand with a calm tone, as if I was not interested in the gossip she was going to tell. Xiao Zhang scratched her head, a little hesitant. Originally, based on strength, we would be convinced by both you and Monica in the end. But when she said this, her expression started to become subtle, as if she was choosing her words carefully. Don't keep me in suspense. I looked up and said in a gentle tone, it's just the two of us. There's no one else here, just tell me straight. She hesitated for a moment and whispered, but I saw Monica and Chris hugging each other in the tea room a few days ago. Chris? I frowned. He's the boss Naruto's son. She lowered her voice. This isn't a secret, right? So you know Monica is likely to win directly with this relationship. I was stunned for a few seconds. Then I couldn't help laughing. It turned out that while I was holding my phone in the hospital, worrying about whether Monica, who was silent, was sick, she was playing a secret game with the rich second generation. How ironic. That's not surprising. I chuckled, my tone self-deprecating. Personnel appointments are arranged by our superiors anyway, so just let it go. There's no point in being anxious. She sighed, as if she felt sorry for me. But I lowered my head, continued to analyze the data, and waved her away nonchalantly. An unexpected visit. An old lover reappears. Who would have thought that Monica would have the nerve to knock on my office door? When there was a light knock on the glass door, I subconsciously looked up, a little surprised. Although we didn't break up, it didn't mean we could still chat calmly. For me, this relationship had long been reset to zero, and we returned to the position of strange colleagues. She stood at the door, wearing a neatly ironed suit and looking a little cold. Even through a layer of glass, I could still feel her aura. Come in, I said casually. Monica slowly walked to my desk, glanced at me calmly, and then said, William, I thought you were going to quit. Why? I raised my eyebrows. On the surface, I appeared calm, but in my heart, I became alert. Her voice was low, and her tone was somewhere between persuasion and advice. Albert will be transferred to Nanjing next month. One of us will be promoted to director and take her position. If I were you, I would make plans early and find a way out for myself. I didn't say anything for a while, just stared at her, trying to find some clues from her expression. She paused and added, William, we have been together for 7 years. I'm not heartless. But if you continue to stay here after I get promoted, in order to avoid gossip, I may have to force you to resign voluntarily. So this was her intention. She was so sure that she would become a director that she kindly advised me to run away quickly to avoid an embarrassing situation in the future. I lowered my head and chuckled, a smile without any warmth. He changed his mind so quickly and asked me to see the situation and give way. It's fine if the feelings are gone, but it's really eye-opening that a person can be so cold and heartless. I raised my head and stared at her as if I were looking at a stranger. Monica, you are such a piece of trash. This was the first time she had said a dirty word in the 7 years I had known her, but she certainly deserved the comment. She was stunned for a moment, as if she didn't expect me to be so direct. Calm down, she frowned, her tone a little unhappy. I'm doing this for your own good. For my own good? I sneered. At the beginning, you swore that our relationship would not be involved in work, but what happened? You turned around and hugged the boss's son, stepped on me to climb up, and now you come here to act like a good person? Her expression changed, and she seemed to want to refute, but she didn't know how to open her mouth. I leaned back in my chair with a sneer on my face. Okay, you get promoted to director, and I'll do my job. We can go our separate ways. Just don't disgust me. She stared at me for a while, as if she was stung by my attitude, and then snorted coldly. Since you are so ungrateful, don't blame me for not showing you mercy when the time comes. After saying this, she turned and left, her steps firm and powerful, as if she was deliberately showing her strength. I stared at her back, and there were only two words in my mind: ridiculous. Officially started dealing with Chris was an afternoon that couldn't be more ordinary. The office was so quiet that only the sound of keyboards could be heard. Others were either eating or resting at their workstations. I was alone in the tea room, grinding coffee beans by hand, and the aroma gradually spread. Just then, I heard a slight sound of footsteps behind me. I turned around and saw Chris standing there. I have to admit that he is indeed very handsome, and if I were a woman, I would also fall in love with him. But as I looked at him, my eyes were filled with some indescribable meaning. I instinctively moved aside to make way for him, but instead of moving away, he stood still and stared at me. "William, I know Monica was your girlfriend." He suddenly spoke, his voice so soft that he seemed to be deliberately testing my emotions. "Monica." I felt my scalp tingle when I heard this name, and I almost spilled the coffee beans in my hand. Him coldly, with an expression that said, "If you have something to say, just say it." He seemed a little dissatisfied with my calmness, and his eyes slid from my face to my hand, and then back to my face, probably waiting for my reaction. After a while, he sighed, and his tone seemed to show off. "I saw the playlist named after you by Monica. To be honest, your previous underground relationship was not kept secret very well." I kept a straight face and waited patiently for him to continue. He probably felt that it was not satisfying enough and added, "You know what? My father admires Monica very much. He said that she is as capable as any man, young and promising, courageous and motivated. He thinks Monica is very much like himself when he was young, so he plans to train her well." When he said this, there was a hint of pride in his eyes. "Coincidentally, I like her too, and she likes me too. Now that we are together, you'd better stay away from her." His tone seemed to be announcing an indisputable fact, and then he changed the subject. "But William, don't you feel sad watching us dating every day? If I were you, I would resign on my own initiative." I almost couldn't help laughing when I heard this. He actually came to the tea room to protest against me in person. He was really bored. I held the coffee cup, my face calm, and my voice so gentle that she couldn't catch me. "Oh, then Chris came here today to inform me of an important decision?" He was stunned for a moment, probably not expecting me to be so direct. "I hope you could be sensible and resign of your own accord." He said it very bluntly, his eyes even showing a bit of pity. "I think this will be good for all of us, so as to avoid embarrassment in the future." I lowered my head and took a sip of coffee, then looked up at her and said in a light tone, "Chris, the company's personnel changes need to go through formal procedures. If you mean to fire me today, please ask HR to come and talk to me and list the specific reasons." His expression changed slightly, but he quickly adjusted himself, and his eyes became a little more gloomy. I looked at his face and added slowly, "Oh, by the way, according to company regulations, changes in manager positions and above must be approved by the chairman in person. Chris, you are currently an intern, right? I'm afraid such a decision is not within your authority." After saying that, I smiled slightly, picked up the coffee cup, walked around him, and walked straight out of the tea room, too lazy to waste another second. Not long after the soft, hard conversation with Chris ended, Albert's appointment notice to be transferred to Nanjing was officially received. The office was in turmoil again, and the battle for the position of director became the topic of conversation for everyone. I watched with a cold eye, but I knew better than anyone that whether it was Chris's protest or Monica's taking shortcuts, these were just part of the jungle law of the workplace. Before Albert left, Chairman Naruto prepared a farewell banquet for her. All the company's management-level people were present. All of them were the heads of various departments. The banquet was in the name of Albert's farewell, but everyone knew that with her transfer, personnel changes in the core departments of the headquarters would be finalized. The invitation letter was personally delivered to my desk by the department manager. I was so upset at the time. She was lying on the table, looking more nervous than a student taking the college entrance examination. She first pretended to cheer me up. "Brother William, come on." Then she said solemnly, "No matter what, everyone in our team stands behind you. If you can't make it here, we will follow you to go somewhere else." I smiled, picked up the invitation, and tapped her forehead gently. "Don't talk nonsense, it's just a meal. Besides, have you forgotten what my life creed is?" Xiao Zhang blinked his eyes and said, "Build a bridge over the water and a road over the mountain." "Smart." I nodded, my eyes firm. "Why are you afraid? Besides, I won't be the loser." The banquet begins, undercurrent surges. The farewell banquet was held in a high-end restaurant near the company. The atmosphere was not grand, but it exuded a sense of formality that should not be underestimated. In the private room, the heads of the marketing department, management department, human resources department, finance department, and business department were all present. Chairman Naruto sat in the main seat, Chris was on his left, and Monica sat next to Chris. As soon as the banquet started, the atmosphere was tense. After all, there had been rumors about the relationship between Monica and Chris, and now that they were sitting side by side, it was basically set in stone. However, no one brought it up. The management was full of smart people, and since the boss didn't say anything, everyone tacitly pretended to know nothing. I sat obediently next to the deputy manager of the finance department. During the whole process, I ate, drank, and chatted. On the surface, I was calm, but in my heart, I was silently observing everyone's reactions. Who will be the winner and who will be sacrificed? This banquet was ostensibly for farewell, but in reality, it was more like a secret war. The theme of the banquet, in addition to reviewing Albert's contribution to the company, was to wish her great success in Nanjing. After 3 rounds of drinks, everyone had exchanged pleasantries, and Naruto finally put down his chopsticks, and the topic gradually turned to the main topic. The real protagonist appears. Naruto was a man in his 50s, well-maintained, and in a mental state that looked like he was in his early 40s. He wiped his mouth and glanced at the people in the box. Everyone was waiting with bated breath. He said, "In addition to celebrating Albert's performance at today's dinner, there is also something important to announce." I put down the chopsticks in my hand and looked up at him. When my eyes swept over Monica next to me, I accidentally saw that the corners of her lips were slightly raised, and her smile was appropriate, intellectual, and steady. Her eyes fell softly on Chris's face next to her. The two of them really looked like a talented man and a beautiful woman. I silently looked away, picked up the towel beside me, and slowly wiped my hands. Naruto's voice was still gentle, deep, and powerful. "Everyone knows that I only have one son." As soon as these words came out, the whole box was so quiet that you could hear a pin drop. Everyone's eyes turned to Chris next to her, and there was a subtle tension in the air. When he just graduated, I arranged for him to join the company, but he was strong-willed and didn't want to rely on my reputation. He wanted to rely on himself and work his way up from the bottom. Over the years, I'm very satisfied with his performance, and I've heard a lot of your praise for him. Naruto paused, with a hint of pride in his tone. Now, the time is almost right. Albert happened to be transferred to Nanjing, and I think it's time to formally introduce him to everyone. Before he finished speaking, everyone turned to look at Chris almost at the same time. He couldn't hide the smugness on his face, and a meaningful smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. But many people were also skeptical. How many years did the chairman say? But Chris was still an intern and had only worked for less than half a year. This sentence was like a depth charge that hit the originally calm lake. Although no one made a sound, I could clearly feel the subtle atmosphere in the air, jealousy, resentment, surprise, everything. I lowered my eyes, clenched the towel, and raised the corners of my mouth slightly. Chris's identity finally surfaced, but this drama is far from over. The banquet continued. The sound of glasses clinking and polite words were exchanged. However, I had only one thought in my mind. Since someone likes to play a big game, I am happy to accompany them to the end. Naruto's eyes passed through the seats and fell on me quietly. His expression was smiling and a little proud, as if he had already anticipated all possible reactions. She raised her hand and stretched it out to me, her tone gentle but full of strength. "William, come to Daddy. It's time to let everyone get to know each other." The air in the box suddenly stagnated, and everyone seemed to hold their breath. I calmly put down the napkin in my hand with a faint smile on my lips. In the strange silence, only the sound of Monica's glass falling to the ground broke the brief silence. I glanced at her. Her face was relatively calm, with a smile on her lips. She picked up a tissue and wiped the tabletop. Her movements were slow and methodical, even elegant. However, when she looked up, the slight paleness on her face could not escape my sight. As for the emotions surging deep in her eyes, I was too lazy to interpret them. I looked away, not even bothering to spare a glance, and just stood up and walked towards the main seat amid the various looks from the crowd. When I passed by Chris, I gently placed my hand on the back of his chair and said politely and calmly, "Chris, please move aside." In the box, a sound of someone sucking in a breath of shock came from someone's mouth, as if putting an exclamation mark on the drama of the moment. The party quickly ended after achieving its purpose. Although everyone remained professional and calm on the surface, everyone knew that what happened tonight would cause a huge stir. I could even imagine how this incident would ferment inside and outside the company tomorrow. I didn't look back at Monica, not because I didn't care, but because there was no need. She once said to me, "William, people always have to go higher." Now I am curious whether she is struggling on her road to higher places. When the show was over, she and the pale-faced Chris came over and greeted Naruto, her voice low and restrained. "Mr. Lee, Mr. Fong, we're leaving first." I didn't respond, just stood aside silently. Naruto's eyes fell on Monica's face with an inquiring look, and then turned to Chris. After a moment, she smiled, and her tone was so easygoing that no one could find fault with it. "Okay, take care." Only after everyone in the box left did the smile on his face fade away. He turned to look at me, his tone mixed with tentativeness and scrutiny. "What's going on between you and Monica?" Yes, I mentioned Monica to him before. When I just graduated, I was young and full of energy, and I always thought that my love life could be as steady as my career. So even though I didn't say explicitly that we were dating, he probably guessed it a long time ago. I met his gaze, chuckled, and replied coldly, "Didn't you see it?" Chris stole it. His mother is good at meddling in other people's relationships, so his son naturally inherited this skill. I paused deliberately, then added in a sonorous voice, "Dad." This was the first time I called Naruto Dad since I became an adult, but the coldness in my tone was more biting than the winter wind. The last time I called her Dad was when I was 7 years old. At that time, he had just divorced my mother. At the gate of the villa, I pulled her sleeve and asked again and again, "Dad, why did Mom want to divorce you? Say something." He never answered. When I was a child, I didn't understand the meaning of silence. I just felt like I was abandoned. Later, when I grew up a little, I realized that in the adult world, grudges and hatreds are always much more complicated than a child's questions. Naruto and Chris' mother were childhood sweethearts, but the woman despised her for being poor and married someone richer. Naruto married my mother, a woman who accompanied him from having nothing to having a successful career. Ironically, when Naruto's career got better, the woman divorced Chris and came back to him, placing her and her son's future firmly on his shoulders in an almost righteous manner. Naruto was young. He was always upset about his childhood sweetheart's choice of being rich and despising the poor. The more he held a grudge, the harder it was for him to completely forget the past. But my mother never mentioned these things to me, and she always tried to maintain his dignity. My mother was a cool and self-respecting person. After being betrayed, she divorced without any hesitation. After the divorce, he did not marry Chris' mother, but just raised her and her son by his side, openly to repay the favor, but secretly ridiculed her for being blind. What's more ironic is that Chris's original surname was Wong, and in order to please Naruto, she changed her surname to Chris when she was 8 years old. Since then, she and her mother seem to have transformed into the chosen ones and lived their lives arrogantly. But they didn't know I existed, and I saw through their tricks early on. When I was 8 years old, I ran back to the villa without telling my mother, and I ran into Naruto celebrating Chris' birthday. He held the 10-year-old Chris in his arms, and Chris' mother stood beside him. The three of them had happy smiles on their faces, as if they were a family. And I was just the outsider forgotten in the corner. After that day, I never called Naruto Dad again. Naruto always thought that my mom said something bad about him in front of me, so I refused to call him Dad, and even meeting him became extremely rare. Monica only knew that my parents were divorced, and didn't know about my complicated family background, nor did she know that I changed my name from Li Fong to William. After graduation, Naruto found me and said in a very high-sounding way, "These years, I only have you as my child. Doesn't your mother understand? You are my biological child, the kingdom that your mother and I built together. Who else can I leave it to if not you?" He paused and added, "Your aunt has always wanted her son to join the company, but I blocked her. William, Dad knows what's going on." "You know what's going on?" I sneered in my heart. My mother was a proud and innocent person. When she divorced Naruto, she only took what she was supposed to take and didn't even take any extra compensation. But I'm different from her. I'm not the noble Virgin Mary. I will never give up what's mine. What's more, the more unhappy others are, the happier I am. So, I agreed to Naruto's arrangement and joined the company after graduation with Monica, starting from the bottom of the core business department and climbing up step by step. Naruto's attention to Monica has always been just right. He praised Monica many times in the company as young and promising, and said that he had unlimited future. I know that this is just because I mentioned Monica in front of him. He may want to please me, or he may have other calculations. But my original plan was to wait for Naruto to reveal my identity and then slowly explain my complicated family background to Monica, who knew that my carefully designed plot was reversed by Monica herself. She and Chris teamed up to give me a surprise. Naruto's guilt and my counterattack. After the farewell party, I saw fatigue on Naruto's face for the first time. He sighed tiredly and said, "Dad is sorry for you." I chuckled with mockery in my eyes. It's just men's nature. Although the words were light, they were like a needle piercing his heart. I suddenly thought of Chris's demonstration in the tea room that day. He said with a smug look on his face, "Naruto said Monica is very similar to him when he was young." Now that I think about it, they are indeed very similar. Not only in terms of being heartless and ungrateful, but also in terms of lack of vision. After this uproar, I took 3 days off. 3 days was enough time for the company's spectators to digest all the explosive news. When I returned to the company, my colleagues all seemed calm and treated me as usual. They didn't come around to ask questions or pretend to sympathize with me. It was just that their smiles were a little more enthusiastic than before. Experienced people in the workplace always know how to strike a balance and don't make people feel that they are being deliberate. Brother William pretends to be a pig and eats the tiger. Xiao Zhang is a warm-hearted person. After not seeing each other for 3 days, she was furious when she saw me, saying that I was playing dumb to eat the tiger, and made her worry for several days in vain. Finally, I used a sumptuous seafood meal to coax her. She pried open the lobster claws and asked me with gritted teeth, "Brother William, are you a real rich young master? What role does Chris play?" I didn't intend to hide it from her, so I simply told her the twists and turns. She listened with her eyes wide open and finally sighed in disbelief. "Oh my God, there are such shameless people in this world. He dares to cheat under the name of a big boss's son. It's disgusting." She was silent for a while, then quietly came over and whispered, "Brother William, when you were away for a few days, many colleagues in the company secretly asked me gossip. Can I tell them? I really can't stand Chris's arrogant look." I smiled, peeled a piece of lobster leg meat for her, and said calmly, "It's not a secret. If someone asks, just tell them what you want to say." News storm. The whole company knows. Xiao Zhang's fighting spirit never let me down. In just one afternoon, Chris's background became a hot topic known to everyone in the company. When I went to the finance department to review the project budget in the afternoon, I saw Chris standing in front of the decommissioning desk as soon as I entered the room. Her face looked as if she had swallowed a fly. The decommissioning frowned, pointed at the item on the expense report, and asked her coldly, "Why do you have to use the company's account to reimburse the bag you bought? This approval will not be approved. In addition, I suggest you check other expense items carefully. Don't use the company's account for all personal belongings." Chris's face looked even more embarrassed when Huffei finished speaking. She picked up the expense report form and glared at me as she turned and left, as if I was the mastermind behind Huffei, making things difficult for her. I don't think so. Since Naruto revealed my identity, I have started to get involved in the specific affairs of each department of the company. Understanding these can give me a clearer understanding of the company's macro development. As for Chris's little tricks, she is really not worth wasting my time. Personnel changes. Monica's loneliness. The company's personnel changes came as expected. Monica was not promoted to director and was temporarily managed remotely by Albert in Nanjing. My original manager position was also vacant, and the company poached a business manager from another large company to replace me. After the personnel adjustment was finalized, many familiar colleagues in the company sent WeChat and text messages to congratulate me, with the exception of 2 people, Monica and Chris. Since I returned to the company, these 2 people have been avoiding me as if they had agreed on it. In fact, they don't have to do this. I'm very busy. There are so many things in the company, and I need to sort out each one bit by bit. Monica and Chris? They are not the same kind of people, and I really don't have the time to pay attention to them. But obviously, they don't think so. Chris is provocation. Chris came to see me first, still in the tea room, still with the familiar aroma of coffee beans. The only difference was that this time his expression changed from the last time's domineering to angry. He stood behind me and said through gritted teeth, "Hypocrisy." I was too lazy to pay attention to him and continued to grind my coffee. Seeing that I didn't respond, he became even more angry. "At the beginning, your mother pretended to be indifferent to everything and walked away, saying never to contact each other again. I thought you really didn't care about the Leaf family's assets. I didn't expect that it was all fake. You pretended to be indifferent, but in fact, you were fighting to get it back. I finally stopped what I was doing, turned around and looked at her, my expression calm as water. Chris, you were so excited. Are you afraid of something? Or are you afraid that I will take something that doesn't belong to you? He was stunned for a moment, and his tone suddenly became weaker. If you are really noble and look down on Dad's assets, then don't come back. It's disgusting to say one thing and do another. I chuckled. My mom didn't want it at first, but I'm different. I always think that if something belongs to me, I have to give it back even if someone else has taken it away. What do you think? Chris's stupid words made me laugh. To be honest, Chris has always been a joke in my eyes. Earlier, he asked me, "Have you thought about how to deal with me?" At that time, I really wanted to tell him that there was no need to deal with him. As long as he was in the company, everything would happen naturally. It was definitely not her who made me miserable, but the way he looked miserable in the company. From the beginning, I never considered Chris as a rival. Look at him, apart from some low-level provocations and showing off his presence to Monica. What made me feel that he was a threat to me? He was not qualified. I looked at him with gentleness in my eyes, as if I were looking at a clown. Chris, don't say such stupid things again. Look at how angry you are now. It's as if I cut your flesh and stabbed your heart. He was stunned for a moment, and I continued calmly. I just took back what belongs to me, but you look like you've suffered a loss. It's ridiculous. If I were you, I would go home and persuade your mother, and try to win over Mr. Lee in a different way. Chris's face became increasingly ugly and finally turned pale. He seemed to want to refute something, but under my sneer, he finally chose to remain silent. Chris's hypocrisy and Monica's future. I can't argue with you, Chris whispered, but William, I'm not completely broke. The girlfriend you've loved for 7 years is still in my hands. I raised my eyebrows in disdain. Garbage belongs in the trash can. Just take what you can take away. What's there to brag about? The reluctance in his eyes could not be concealed at all. He might have thought that Monica was a stepping stone for her to climb up. He chose Monica, perhaps because she was the youngest in the company and had a bright future, or because Naruto had always doted on her. I understand that Chris regards Monica as a springboard for his career. He thinks that Monica can help him gain a foothold and even take him to a higher position. Unfortunately, Monica is not as easy to control as she thinks. Not to mention that he has already misjudged her mind. He will eventually find that all the bluffing and mutual exploitation will eventually leave them with nothing. All of this is really hilarious. Liu Yan's resignation and final farewell. Monica's resignation was completely within my expectations. She had been with the company for so many years, but there was no reason for her to stay. She went through the resignation procedures meticulously, without my involvement. It was not until her last day that she sent me a message asking if we could talk. I really don't understand what I have to talk about with her. To be honest, Monica called me on the night Naruto revealed my identity and said she was waiting for me downstairs at my house. At that time, Naruto asked me to stay at the mansion for a few days to sort out the interpersonal relationships in the company. I didn't go back to my house and ignored Monica's call. After that, she never came again. But this time, she came to me desperately, as if to say a final farewell. She came even though I didn't reply to her message. Monica's calmness and my attitude. I have always admired Monica's calmness. That is a necessary trait for successful people. Although there are so many unpleasant things in the past between us, she can pretend that there is no unpleasant past between us, and she is calm as if we have never betrayed each other. She walked into the room and calmly handed me a cup of coffee. I took it and stood by the window with her, looking at the bright night view outside. The city's tall buildings were brightly lit, and through the glass window, it seemed as if I was in the Milky Way. I heard Monica beside me whispered, "Remember when we first started working? That was 5 years ago, 2 freshly graduated college students." She was also standing on such a high floor, overlooking the lights outside the window. At that time, Monica joined the company with great ambitions, ready to show her talents. However, her first job was the most insignificant task. Who would have thought that this man who was originally full of ambition would start from this position? However, she was not discouraged. With her own ability, she finally won $1 million order. That night, she excitedly said to me, "William, let's build a home in this city together." I drank a little too much at the time, and the paralysis of alcohol made me feel that every cell in my body was protesting, but looking at her excited face, I felt a surge of anger in my heart. However, things did not go as planned. That big order ended up being her boss's achievement, and she only got a 500 yuan bonus. So, She used the 500 yuan to treat me to a hot pot meal. I remember that meal. I couldn't see the expression on her face. The air was filled with steam from the pot. I could only hear her low voice. William, if we continue like this, when will we be able to make a name for ourselves? At that moment, I saw the confusion and puzzlement flash across her face. It was the first and last time I saw this expression on her face. It was like a lost child, lost in the fog before her eyes. Naruto-S rescue and Monica-S ideal. After that hot pot, I want to find Naruto. Since she divorced my mom has never seen her again, not to mention her wealth and resources. Even though she gave me an unlimited bank card, my mom and I never used it. That was the first time I asked Naruto for help. I remember when he looked at me, there was a flash of surprise in his eyes. You actually came to ask me for help? He happily agreed, but also warned me meaningfully. William, if she can't even handle such a small matter in the society and relies on me for help, then she is not worthy of being the daughter-in-law of my Lee family. Although she said this, I knew that he had already noticed Monica's praise of her in some public occasions. The preference of the superiors is the source of power, and Monica's career was naturally a natural success. Monica is smart and capable. Although she started slowly, she is destined to have an extraordinary future if she has the right opportunity. However, I didn't expect that we would drift further and further apart on this competitive road. She is like the top scholar in ancient times, dreaming of rising to fame through the favor of the princess. But this may be her understanding of getting ahead, relying on others, and relying on the protection of a powerful force. Monica's betrayal and my counterattack. Monica's tone was filled with nostalgia and exploration. How did we become like this? Her gently, Monica, don't talk to me about feelings anymore. I understand your previous choice of a good bird chooses a good tree to roost in. But now, don't let me look down on you anymore. She also smiled, turned her head, and looked at me intently, without saying a word. After half a minute, her smile gradually faded, replaced by a serious tone. Is it impossible to be just ordinary friends? William, I betrayed you, and you concealed things from me. Are we even now? I took a deep breath and responded calmly. I don't know what you mean by even, but the even is based on my identity as Naruto-S son. If I were not Naruto-S son, what would happen to me today? She was stunned, as if she didn't expect me to say it so bluntly. I said calmly, I saw you and Chris having an affair. Under your power and pressure, I had no choice but to resign. According to the non-compete agreement, I can't even work in the same industry. I paused, with a hint of coldness in my eyes. The hard work I've put in over the past few years has finally become a stepping stone for you and Chris's love. I'm drinking the cold wind on the streets, wandering around in despair, while you're enjoying the best life in a high-rise building in the city center. I looked down at her pale, dazed face and smiled slightly. Monica, tell me now, are we even? Her expression became a little stunned, but I didn't give her another chance to explain. I said politely and distantly, there is no such thing as even. You owe me, and you will owe me for the rest of your life. I don't intend to forgive you generously. From now on, dust to dust, earth to earth, and when we meet again, we will just be strangers. Monica's back gradually went away, and I stood there with cold eyes. Her departure seemed to make everything clearer. I never intended to keep anything for her. After all, she chose this path herself, and I had already gotten rid of all the entanglements with her. I left the empty office and returned to my position. Now, under Naruto's protection, I am no longer the person who can only be cautious in the corner. I have taken over most of the company's affairs and stood at a new starting point. I am unstoppable. William, Manager Lee, there's a cocktail party tonight. Are you going? The secretary's voice interrupted my thoughts. I smiled and nodded. Yes, of course. The venue for the cocktail party was luxurious, and all the senior executives would gather here. My appearance undoubtedly attracted the attention of the old hands. I was no longer the junior employee who had just started from the grassroots level, but had a say in this big company. When I walked into the venue, almost all eyes were unconsciously focused on me. I know that they looked at me, perhaps with envy, jealousy, or sighing. In the past few years, I've climbed up step by step with my own efforts, and now I stand in this position and have become a legend in their mouths. The atmosphere of the cocktail party was warm and complicated. On the surface, it seemed harmonious, but in reality, various forces were competing secretly. I looked around, gently raised the wine glass, and smiled calmly. William, I didn't expect you to be here too. Suddenly, A familiar voice sounded. I looked up, and Monica appeared in my sight. Her face was a little pale, but she still maintained that familiar elegance. She stood there and looked at me with a smile. "Don't you want to deal with me?" I responded coldly, with a hint of disdain in my tone. Monica's smile paused for a moment, but she quickly regained her composure. She walked over to me and whispered, "I just came to apologize to you." She paused and looked at me again. "In fact, we don't need to delve into many things. They're all in the past. Now, you and I are in different positions, aren't we?" I shook my head slightly. "Different positions, how dare you say that? What do you think you'll gain by standing on Chris' side?" Monica's expression was slightly stiff, and I could feel that she was suppressing some emotions. The funny thing was that in her eyes, I was no longer the person she wanted to rely on, but someone who stood on the opposite side of her. "You and Chris," I sneered. "You are just tools used by each other. When all your resources are exhausted, all that will be left is emptiness and regret." Monica was silent for a while, and finally lowered her head. "William, I admit that I did something wrong." I ignored her and turned around to the other end of the party. At this moment, my heart was no longer moved by her, and I didn't even have a trace of regret for her. The pinnacle of power. The atmosphere of the cocktail party became more and more intense, and the sounds of various wine glasses clinking together intertwined. I stood calmly aside, my eyes scanning every familiar or unfamiliar face. "William here." Naruto's voice suddenly came. I turned to look at her, and Naruto had a playful smile on his face. "You're here too." I walked over and responded lightly. Naruto glanced at me, a hint of satisfaction flashing in his eyes. "As expected, you are worthy of being the one I have chosen. If it were just such a small matter, it wouldn't make me so moved." I smiled faintly, still maintaining my usual composure. Naruto laughed and patted my shoulder. "Not bad, William. Now, you are no longer the kid who bows his head in front of me. You have stood on a high place. Look at these people. Who dares not bow to you?" I looked at the senior executives around me who had been friends with me. They were all trying to please me and were constantly complimenting me. Yes, I used to be an insignificant person in their eyes, but now no one dared to ignore me. "They are not your real opponents." Naruto's words made me more determined in my belief. As the party came to an end, I returned to the company, my heart full of longing for the future. Now, I am no longer the employee who is looked down upon, but a key figure with a say. Part 3. Monica's Last Stand. A few months later, Monica appeared in my sight again. This time, she became more low-key and no longer seemed to be the confident, strong woman. Her relationship with Chris seemed stable, but I knew that the rift between them was irreparable. "William, can we talk again?" Monica stood in front of me with a hint of uncertainty in her eyes. I looked at her and said calmly, "What is there to talk about? I don't care about you and Chris." Monica grabbed my arm tightly and said anxiously, "William, it's not what you think. I have decided to leave Chris and start over." I was stunned for a moment, then sneered. "Do you think I will believe you as long as you say that?" Monica's expression became a little complicated. "I know I was wrong, but I really don't want to go on. I missed you before, but now I want to start over." I looked at her and couldn't help but sigh. "Monica, you really don't understand? What do you think of me? I won't change anything for you. You've already embarked on this path, and now you should accept it." Monica's face darkened, and she seemed unwilling to accept this reality. But I knew that no matter how she struggled, she would eventually have to accept the path she had chosen. Part 4. Gains and Determination. After years of hard work, I finally stood at the top of the industry. Whether it was power or wealth, I already had enough chips. At this time, I was no longer the ignorant young man at the cocktail party, but a real controller. I stood in the company's high-level conference room, looking at the city view outside the window, and my heart was filled with a sense of accomplishment. The past no longer bothered me. Monica, Chris, they were just the scenery I passed by, and they could no longer affect my determination. "William, you did a great job." Naruto's voice sounded in my ears again. He walked into the meeting room, and his eyes fell on me with satisfaction. I turned to look at him and smiled faintly. "This is what I deserve. The future belongs to you." There was a deep certainty in Naruto's eyes. At this point, there were no more obstacles to my future. No matter how Monica struggled or how Chris struggled, I was no longer someone who needed to rely on others for support. I was holding a cup of coffee, looking out from my high-rise office at the traffic coming and going. The flowers on the street were blooming again. It was already another spring in April. Now I have reached the top, ready to take on more challenges and continue to write my own legend.